Zero apologies.
Droppin Truths.
Hey, this is us doing anti-racist work in Olympia, Washington, and throughout the country.
If we're doing it right, you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable, if not a lot of it uncomfortable. So sit with it and grapple with the truths we drop.
It's time to do the work, people. Zero apologies.
Droppin Truths.
I feel like since we're virtual, and we're virtual because the pandemic. This is going to be the healthcare vaccine edition, and the reason that we are on virtual platform miles apart, is because in Thurston County and across the country, the virus is spiking out of control. But we're so happy that Cabin Light Studios came up with a solution to help make sure that Zero Apologies, Droppin Truths gets the airtime that it deserves.
Exactly. So shout out to Cabin Light, and specifically Brenda, who's holding it down for us in the background today.
Right, and apparently we need to go to her Instagram page to find out all the amazing photos.
Yes, so good.
All right.
So what do you want to talk about today, Kyle Cronk?
Well, first, welcome. It's good to see you. And I want to talk about a lot of different things, but so today is the first time in the United States that so the vaccine was developed and it got emergency approval, and in other countries, a couple other countries, it's already been approved and had been distributed. And today, for the first time, somebody in the United States received the vaccine. And now we're kind of on that path. But there was an amazing article, amazing for me, about the learning that was in it. And I would encourage everybody to go read Charles M. Blow, who's an opinion columnist for the New York Times, How Black People Learn Not to Trust. And a friend of mine on Facebook posted it. Another friend and colleague of mine posted yet another example of it, and she had some pretty interesting things to say about how do we deal with the mistrust, because we want people to take the vaccine, because if people aren't if in fact the vaccine is safe and it is going to do what it needs to do, which is to get rid of the virus of COVID-19, that's how the world is going to go back to whatever normal was pre-COVID. So a couple things. Mistrust in the Black community about our healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a topic that we're going to talk about.
Let's freaking do it. Yeah, so I think it's a fascinating topic. I was thinking about, when you were talking about how I don't think I've ever been in the presence of a doctor that I didn't inherently expect and then have them follow through on harming me, except for my current practitioner, and that's in like 39 years of life. With a lot of different, you have like sports physicals when you're growing up, you have all the vaccination checks, all of those that have consistently and significantly been harmed by the medical field. And so I think it's a pressing topic that, for the Black folks who listen are going to be like, truth. And for the white folks, maybe blow your mind. I don't know, but it's real. It's super real.
It blew my mind. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things. This article is definitely, we should maybe post this article onto our page.
Yeah, we'll put it's in the links down below, so we'll drop it like it's hot.
Yeah. Because one of the things, I mean, people were sterilized without their consent for much of for 60 some odd years. I mean, it's just incredible. So now you have this concept of, you have a disease that is disproportionately hurting Black and brown communities, and there's significant distrust that the vaccine is going to be the thing that helps.
Oh, for sure. Because if you think about like our history in general in this country is that blackness was property, not human. And so there were so many uses of blackness in order to like further the thrive of whiteness. And so when you think about then any time that individuals that are black are given opportunity to access medical care, that either it will be subpar or it inherently will be harmful. And that is just a state of being. In addition to that, there's this programming that happens for black folks in our society in which you can't challenge or question authority. And so there's another dynamic of a doctor being an authority figure will show up in space and say, hey, I think you need to take, X, Y, and Z medication. And we don't have necessarily permission as a society to be like, time out, what? Like, why? Like, what's happening right now? And so to find medical practitioners who are willing to really look at how their practice is perpetuating white supremacy is super rare. Like I said, I've probably come in contact with over 200 doctors and only never been harmed by one. So when
and that's the current medical person that you see.
Current practitioner, Percy. Shout out to Percy because Percy is.
I was gonna say.
And he like wears little bow ties, and he's from the South, so he'd be like, "Now listen here, Sarah." And I love me some Percy, but literally from jump, he was like, "Look, here's the thing. I'm in this with you, and it's a partnership." So I've never been treated like that by a doctor, and rarely been treated like that by a white person. So, and I don't know the stats on how many, medical practitioners are white, but probably around hella percent. So, thinking about like, how do you disrupt that and how do you like overcome that as a person of color, and especially a black person, when you know that our history is so fucked about medical care?
Right, and that's where I wanted to go. Well, one, I think there's two, maybe even three streams of learning through this, and we talk about it, Zero Apologies, that part of the work of being anti-racist is learning what you don't know. So you're going to hear things and you're going to think, wow, I didn't know that, and then now you need to go figure out more about that. So, and there's plenty, and this article, the one that we'll link to, has many ways that you can go and do more research on your own, but also then getting back into community. So, those of you that are connected to Sarah or Kyle individually through this, I mean, reach out to us, talk to us, engage with us, because at least I would be more than willing to get into a conversation about this. But one of the things that you had talked about was what is the so with this mistrust and hundreds of years of mistrust, how do we begin to have the conversation of whether or not you should take the vaccine?
Well, I think there's multiple layers. I think there's one about, and this isn't exclusive to blackness, but I think there's a pretty prevalent mindset that like there's some type of government control happening through vaccines. So there's like they're installing chips that they can scan and track us with. And you and I were talking about this before, where you were like, I just heard this is mind blowing, and I'm like, I've heard that like for years, thousands of times. And so I think part of it is figuring out like how do you. It's like asking the question. Your best friend has stolen everything from you multiple times. How do you trust them now? And you're like, first of all, what? And then that's your best friend who you chose and adore and love, right? But then you're like, what about your, you can't choose in-laws really. I mean, you choose your partner, but your in-law is like a package deal, right? So like, what about that? What if your in-law keeps stealing from you over and over again? And what does that look like? How do you trust them again? And then if you have even less control, it's like, what about your principal? What about your school teacher? What about your boss? Like, they're Black folks are operating inside of the system where sovereignty and power of choice is minimally accessed,
Right.
because it's minimally given. And then you're like, well, why don't you just trust the people who continue to put you in cages? Um, and so that, I think that's fundamentally first. And then second, to understand that inside of, when you have a macro view of how the Black community moves throughout the world, you can understand that like disproportionate um, impact is real. And when you're in the hurt of the beast, all you know is this is fucking life. And so how do you help people understand that like the disproportionate impact is real, and that we collectively have a desire to like mitigate that? Because sometimes it's just about like, I'm just trying to get through the day, and I don't have COVID today, and I don't know if I'm eating tonight based on this fucking system. And so how do I get some foresight about my own existence when survival seems like a long shot?
Mm.
Yeah, that's a lofty goal. It feels lofty because it is.
Mm-hmm. Do you, so one of my colleagues and friend had talked about this mistrust and looking at the medical community and understanding how our healthcare policies have been, racist from the beginning. And it's no surprise that there's this mistrust. So, her thought was get the mic to Black and brown people, get into churches, talk about, what do you think of that? And what do you think about, because I had thought about how do you position the why to help get the word out that it is safe, if in fact it is safe, which I
Mm-hmm.
have to believe that it is. But what do you think of
Yeah,
that?
I think it's challenging, and
For
I
sure.
think I think there has to be a level of previous investment in the communities. And so I think that's why, like, despite crisis times, it's critical for the Y to show up in our community in a more expansive and more inclusive way, and continuing to like create belonging and centering in all spaces, because it comes down to critical moments like this. Like, if there is no relationship and now it's an emergency and you need something from me, whether it's participation or insight or anything else, when relationship doesn't exist, it's a harder sell than when relationship does exist. So I think, first of all, recognizing like, how do you as an entity, how do you as an individual like show up in all of the spaces all of the time?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's about like being very honest and very realistic about both sides. It's one of the things about like effective counseling or intervention or support inside of like addiction groups, for instance. If you want someone to get rid of a behavior that is harming them, you pretending like the good parts of drug addiction aren't real is not ever going to find a comprehensive solution to the challenge, right? So I've been in spaces where I'm talking to especially youth about like heroin use, and I'm like, okay, what do you love about it? Because we have to get really honest. I think that same honesty is necessary inside the Black community to say, look, the fear is real. The mistrust is real. If we just try to glaze over it and be like, yeah, but look at this. This is amazing. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're asking me to take a vaccine that could extend my life when currently you're perpetuating a system that makes my life torturous. And so why would I want to do something I don't trust in the name of sustaining my worth and value, which is really just generating more money for the rich, right? So
Oh,
when you
wow.
think about the context of that, it hits different than saying like, well, of course, it's like you take vitamins. Why wouldn't you take a vaccine? Like, that's not going to work.
Right.
Those of us who understand know on such a larger scale what it really means for me to survive in the system when I'm not centered.
So backing way up, I mean, as it relates to the why needs to do a better job of being in community,
Mhm.
first of all, and obviously centering differently than it has in its, past.
Right. And when you enter that community relationship, when you're building those bonds, it's just like with other humans. Like people can tell if you're showing up with an agenda. And
Mhm.
most organizations reach out to the marginalized and the unincluded when there's an agenda. Like we need numbers on our board, or we need numbers in our
Mhm.
end of the year, whatever. And so we'll do this massive reach out instead of saying, I don't need anything from you, but I'm here, and understanding that that will take time. But with an agenda, it doesn't land.
So there really isn't. So then back to her point then is give the mic to people that are already in space, that are already there, that are already in community, that are already connected to the communities that, at least in this person's mind, would have a level of mistrust about the virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even that connection demands trust on some level, right? But I think just being really the critical piece in all of this is like the authenticity that is necessary to walk in space with individuals who don't trust you. For instance, it's like in regular standard relationships or romantic relationships, if someone has broken trust, the best and only way to rebuild that trust is not to just be like, hey, Kyle, trust me. That's not how that works. Instead, it is painfully transparent and diligent conversation till the person whose trust has been broken is at a point where it's like, you don't have to tell me that, right? So if you're in a relationship and you have broken trust for whatever way, like it's about being like, okay, hey, I just want to check in with you. I just got 3 emails. This is what was happening. Then they're like, okay. And then you consistently do that over time. Hey, I got a phone call from someone. It was a little bit sketchy. I just want to put that on your radar. Until they, as a person whose trust has been broken, can say like, Kyle, okay, dude, I get it. Like, I'm good. And it doesn't matter if you, as the person who has broken the trust, are tired of it or not. What matters is like if you've broken my trust, that I'm at a point where I'm like, I am confident that whatever happens, I know Kyle will tell me. So until you do that, mistrust continues, right? It's like in
Mhm.
any relationship we've been in, if someone breaks your trust and then you're like watching them like a hawk and then you turn into a detective, that's not a dynamic you want, right? And so what we need is a dominant culture centering of Blackness to understand, again, like if we have broken your trust 1,000 years over, then we have like probably 15,000 years to like
Yeah.
rebuild that structure.
Right. It seems like to get that, to overcome that feeling in the Black community of the mistrust, certainly of the medical community and of society in general, just from the racist construct that everybody's a part of. I mean, how do you overcome that? I mean, that's just such a monument. It just seems so circular, like there's never an ending to it. Because
Sure.
right, because what you're saying is like I don't see society changing like tomorrow whenever the virus starts getting widely distributed. In that, I mean, it just the level of trust that's been broken will take so long, just based on what you just said. Um, who knows if Black people's trepidations about the vaccine will get widely accepted.
Sure. And it's like in any relationship, you get to decide only what you do, what
Right.
you bring to the relationship, and like how you're going to show up. You don't get to decide whether I forgive you, right? And so it's the same in this situation. The challenge is our society has never prioritized the righting of the wrongs long enough to even like sustain anything. So it's kind of like Black folks are in a relationship with a narcissist, and in that space, it's like any minute there can be a flip because nothing that has ever happened has been sustainable. And that's exactly what it's like to date a narcissist, right? They're like all bells and whistles up front, and then it starts downsliding, and in critical moments they can show up again, but not for very long. And so it's that same exact thing. If we want to have a healthy dynamic after this, we have to stop dating the narcissist And that narcissist has to choose to not make it about them anymore and really make it about the relationship moving forward.
Right.
And in that space, then it's like, I don't care how long it's going to take. I will sit here until it's done. Because the other part is like trauma is passed through DNA, right? And so you think about like Dr. Sims, for instance, in the early to mid 1800s was operating non-consensually on Black women and is still regarded as the father of gynecology. But it, like, how many Black women died? They did surgeries with no anesthesia. They did all of these different things to make discoveries that we still operate under today. And so if you don't understand, like, that 1800s was generations ago. So yeah, that mistrust of like, nope, not today. It lasts forever, but also like, how do we disrupt it now? Because I think part of the challenge for people who really want to bring about change is they don't believe it's actually possible. And so that pessimism of the cause creates an a paralysis that keeps us where we're at. And that's how the system is working.
And I think when I read that article and back to Dr. Sims that you just talked about, I mean, that was learning from me. It blew me away, and I had to sit with that just by myself when I read it. I was not in community or talking to anybody at the time, and it's just, you know, I know that I don't know what you think exactly, but just understanding the level, like what historically that does to somebody's psyche is that somebody, you know, did surgeries on people to see what they would do without anesthesia to better a different race is just unreal. And so, yeah, I had to sit with that and continue to sit with it. So it isn't shocking that there's distrust in the Black community.
No. And like, when you get to a point where you're no longer shocked and you understand it, that level of, it's beyond compassion and empathy. It's a level of proximity. Talking about Jeff Andrade again, we talked about him last time too, but like, he talks about without proximity to the pain, you can never engage in the work enough to actually bring about change. And so it's one thing for me to be like, oh, Kyle, you're freezing in that room. That sucks. I've been cold before. It's another to be like, how cold are you? Oh, you can't feel your fingertips? Like, oh my gosh, I feel like I should do something. Like, I'll send you some gloves. Then it's another level to be like, oh, if you're freezing, I'm freezing. So I'll be over in a minute. And together we will find a solution so that you're no longer freezing. And that continuum is like, you know, and there's some before that too, like quit your bitching or you deserve it or whatever. But like, if you get to a point where you're like, I am in this space with you and like, I'm warm over here, but like, if you're cold, we're cold, then that creates a dynamic where there's real commitment to the solution. Like I said, when you're in a relationship and you're like, I will fix this no matter what it takes, that's different than being like, if you're mad, you're mad, you know? So it's understanding at a very deep level, like, to understand that just a few generations ago, my people were being surrendered to science in that way, and that it's never been righted is exactly why none of the suggestions you have, the vaccine being a small drop in that bucket, seem like they fit me.
Yes. I was just looking at the article here. So I think one of the things to do is read this article and then continue as a person that hasn't heard this before to do the research and sit with some of that discomfort that we know will get generated there, for sure.
I think another piece, like, before you read the article, before you engage in community with Black folks, before you read the next book that you're deciding to read by Black authors, is to make a fundamental decision to believe Blackness, because I think there is a level of preservation that comes in whiteness to like do the work, but walk in with like a magnifying glass looking for the holes. And in that space, every single resource of understanding becomes a place where you can find evidence of something else. And so I think unless you decide that whatever you look at, whether it's this article that we drop down below or whether it's, whatever book we decide to read for our brew club, what are we calling it? Okay. Mm-hmm.
We don't have a catchy name yet.
Whatever, listening to these podcasts and understanding that like Kyle is a part of the conversation and so am I, like any of those spaces where you have access to the Black experience, specifically Black women, and then in other spaces, any marginalized population, if you go into that not committed fully to believing what they say is true, like big T true, then we're gonna have a problem. And so it's so critical to decide that whatever I hear, no matter how hard it will land, no matter what it makes me wrestle with inside, I'm going to believe that it's true and then go read the article. Because
yeah. Go ahead.
Without that, we can never move forward and every single piece of wisdom will be reversed as an indictment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the way that you talked about that. We did not talk about that when you necessarily joined the board or anything like that. And it never really dawned on me that there would be a reason to not take your experience as truth. So I'm glad that you pointed that out because I think I think some people will go there for sure. And so thinking about that.
The majority do, yeah.
Say that again, sorry.
I think the majority do. I think, that my own experience is that when I am placed in situations where my lived experience will be shared and or called on the carpet, I think the majority of people wrestle with it in a way that's like that. There's no way that could be true. So let me digest and go through it with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find the one thing that can like discount everything, right?
Sure. Right. I mean, that I don't know what that learning is called, but whatever that is, we definitely need to do that. I mean, that is a critical first step. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Believe Blackness.
So moving forward as it relates to this, I think, step one is believe Blackness, trust in that experience. And from there, that opens up, not only if you have your mind open from that perspective, then you can proceed to go into all the different things that we've either shared here or discovering things on your own. But that is a critical first step for sure. And then being in community. Would you like to shout out a Black-owned business?
Boy, would I. Sergeant Hart's barbecue sauces. They are so fire. And they make barbecue sauce here locally. They're both Black-owned and also disabled veteran-owned as well. So really lifting up not only the Black community, but the Black community who has shown up for our freedom and our privilege to live here. So, yeah, it's roll good, Sergeant Hart's barbecue sauces.
Sweet, thank you. And then a shout out to Cabin Light Studios. They make us look good and sound good and all that sort of stuff.
They are Brown owned and Brown operated. I'm a huge fan. They are legendary. And I love the idea of supporting Brown generational wealth. So let's get after it.
All right. Good job, Cabin Light. All right. Zero apologies, dropping truths. Peace.
Bye.
This was Zero Apologies, Dropping Truths. White folks, share this with your friends and make sure you're doing the work.
And Black folks, welcome home.